Hi guys, welcome to a real talk. I'm looking so scruffy today, but again, these days happen. In fact, these weeks happen. I've been working absolutely flat out, no wig, no makeup, no nothing. It's just, this is me. But I did want to chat to you a little bit about something called psychological safety. It's good to see a couple of people that I recognize. Tyler Ann, lovely to see you on. And this time, guys, I would love for us to invite you to share your voice a little bit. If you want to drop me a question, if you want to join the live, let me know and I could bring you in. And I wanted to talk about psychological safety because I think it's definitely one of the things that, I don't want to call it a buzzword, but it's certainly one of the things that increasingly, when we're talking about the culture of an organization, we keep coming back to this thing and we keep saying that people need to experience psychological safety. So I wanted to unpack it a little bit. I wanted to simplify it a little bit. But the reason why I do these real talks is that I want to make it a tool that you can use for yourself, whether it's in your business, whether it's in your home, whether it's in your church, whether it's in your whatever community of people that you are interacting with and that you need for them to feel psychologically safe so that they can contribute meaningfully, so that they're not afraid to share what they really think. I want to put this tool in your hands and just share it with you. So there's an amazing book called The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, and it's written by a guy called Timothy Clark. 4 Stages of Psychological Safety by Timothy Clark. And Timothy Clark basically says there's something called brave collaboration. So this idea that how is it sometimes that you walk into an organization and you have all sorts of different people, and so the whole diversity thing is there on lockdown, but people are not collaborating, people are not innovating. So all of the stuff that we talk about to say, when you have more diverse teams, they collaborate better, they beyond collaborating, but they also innovate. Why is it that doesn't happen? And one of the things that Timothy Clark says is that he says, well, it doesn't happen because there isn't a space that enables brave collaboration. He talks about how psychological safety is one of the ways that we enable brave collaboration. And what that means is that I'm going to work together with you, but I'm going to be brave enough and courageous enough to actually tell you what I really think, to actually bring my real thoughts and my real inputs, not what you want to hear from me, not what you expect to hear from me. I'm not going to be crippled into compliance, and that is complying into what you need me to be, but I'm going to show up as myself. And then he says that, before we even get into what psychological safety is, he says the presence of fear is the sign of a weakness in leadership. So if people around you are fearful of you, it's a direct sign or a direct reflection of a weakness in leadership. And now I actually think this is true not only just within organizations, but I can see how this is true even in families. If you think about it, the way you lead your family, does it make your children open up to you, as an example? Does it allow them to share their deepest, darkest secrets? Are you the kind of parent who actually knows what's going on in your children's life? Have you created psychological safety? And that psychological safety at its core says, I am not afraid to voice something that is different from what you expect, because I know that my place in this community, my place in this home, my place in this family is not at risk by showing up as who I am. My place in this community, my place in this home, my place in this space is not threatened by me showing up as who I am and what I want to share. So I'm going to keep it brief. I'm going to go through the 4 stages. He says the first stage of psychological safety is what we call inclusion safety. And he says this is not so much formal inclusion, but more informal inclusion. So if you go back to the playground, for an example, and you go back to your primary school days, and you go back to that moment of trepidation when you walked up to a group of children and you asked if you could sit with them or share lunch with them, or whatever the case is. He says that is inclusion safety. You're already included by the mere fact that you are a learner or a student in that school, you're in a particular class. You might even be sitting next to a particular girl or guy or boy in that class. But when it comes to inclusion safety, which is this idea that at break time, can I sit with you and actually share a meal with you? At break time, am I allowed to take a step into your friendship circle? And so he says it's those informal inclusion barriers that determine whether at the very first level people feel that they are included in the first instance. And so somebody, for example, might be part of the formal inclusion. So you are in the class with all of these other learners, but you are informally excluded, because when it comes to breakdown, when it comes to those social, cultural elements of inclusion, you have an outsider status, if that makes sense. And so he says the first step is understanding that formal inclusion doesn't necessarily mean that you've got inclusion safety. And so inclusion safety happens in most often outside of the formal structures. And if you achieve that, that is the first level of psychological safety. It's kind of like in an organization, the feeling of, I actually, beyond just working here and beyond just having an employee number here, I actually really feel part of this team. So what are the things within your organization that make people actually feel that I'm actually part of this team? And oftentimes this has got nothing to do with HR policies and the formal stuff, but what are the things that are happening that make people feel like they really belong here? Random examples, who gets to get invited to drinks after work? Who gets to join you on come over for dinner over the weekends? Because we all form friendships in the places that we work. And so even as adults, similarly, like the child who needs that inclusion safety when they come up to other children to ask if they can sit with them for lunch, we look for inclusion beyond the formal structure. So the question back to you is, in what ways are you making people feel included or excluded by the way you engage with them outside of the formal structures of inclusion? And that's the first level of psychological safety. And so you can imagine Timothy Clark talks about this in stages. So if you don't have the first level of psychological safety, which is inclusion safety, the likelihood is that you're not going to progress to 2, 3, or 4. Okay? And the other thing that he says that I think I really like, he says, when we look at this first level, when we get to this first level of psychological safety, this inclusion safety, what has happened by the other children in accepting you to come sit with them, or somebody inviting you to after work drinks with the rest of the team, is that you have been destigmatized as an outsider, and you have been seen finally and accepted as an insider. And so oftentimes we all have to battle with this first level of inclusion safety. When you arrive, for example, at a new job, you're an outsider by mere virtue of being the last one in through the door. And it's until somebody starts extending their hand to make sure that you are included, that you are destigmatized of being an outsider, and you are welcomed and accepted as an insider. And that inclusion safety is something that you then begin to experience. And he says that, which I really loved, he says, inclusion safety is not about pretending that you are being included because you are the same as us. It's almost, it's a safety that says, I understand that we're different, but I want you to come and sit with me anyway. I understand that you're different. I understand that you're new. I understand that you're not my normal person that I sit with, but I'm going to invite you in anyway. So that is inclusion safety. Are you included in the informal social cultural spaces that you occupy? But also, how do you extend inclusion to others in informal social cultural spaces? Then he says the second level of psychological safety is what he calls learner safety, right? So learner safety basically says, well, I'm already part of the group now, but am I okay with the idea that I'm going to learn alongside others? And remember, learning is a process of discovery. So am I okay with the possibility that I'm going to open myself up to learning? I'm going to open myself up to discovery. I'm going to I feel like I have the permission and the safety net to try things and to make mistakes and to fail, and that is okay. Because oftentimes we would be part of teams, but we don't always feel that if I make a mistake, if it's going to be treated in the same way as if Mary makes a mistake. And so if you have reservations about how safe you are from a learner perspective, it does limit your ability to actually learn. It limits your ability to try things. It limits your ability to put your hand up, because you don't feel that you have the same safety net like others have to make the mistakes that enable learning. So we all know that we learn more from our mistakes than we actually do from our successes. So people who are not given learner safety, but they might have inclusion safety, but they don't have learner safety, mean that they do not open themselves up fully to the process of discovery, to the process of learning, to the opportunity to fail and to fail fast and fail forward, all of these lovely things that we say. If the person doesn't have learner safety, they're never actually going to experience that. And he says, if you're a leader, it's also important for you to consider, how do you react to a person who's showing up in need of learner safety? So oftentimes people who are in need of learner safety ask a lot of questions because they're trying to minimize the risks of making mistakes. So they will ask, more questions than what you might believe is necessary. And he says, is your reaction like the irritated parent who can't stand the fact that their child is asking 107 questions at 107 minutes an hour? Or do you recognize and become conscious about this person needing that learner safety as part of their journey of psychological safety, and you lean in and you answer questions and you encourage more questions until that person feels safe enough that they can lead into the process of discovery without you having to answer every second question for them? And so you start off with inclusion safety, then you move on to learner safety. And basically what we're saying is that when people don't feel safe, and this is so important in corporate South Africa, if people feel that there is differentiated safety nets, that other people are more safe than others, that other people are allowed to make more mistakes than others, those that feel that their safety net is not as robust, those that feel that their safety net is not quite there, are the ones who are going to be least innovative, least open to learning, least open to discovery, least open to putting up their hand. And so before we begin to say things like that group of people don't perform, have we paused to ask, how have we shown up in a way that signals to them that they too are safe and as safe as everybody else? Okay, number 3. The third one, he says, is contributor safety, right? So 4 stages of psychological safety. Stage number 3 is what he calls contributor safety. And he says, well, this happens when you are sort of accepted into a group because of your competence. And you have demonstrated that you either have the skills, or you have the qualifications, or you have the authority. And so by mere virtue of your competence, you get what we call contributor safety. People will pause and listen to you to contribute because you have earned that contributor safety. So he says, for example, if you think about, when a hospital appoints a new head nurse, that head nurse gets contributor safety simply because of the title that she's received and the expectation that because you are head nurse, you are automatically included on the basis of your competence. Now, the interesting and the flip side to this thing is that the danger to it is that if your authority, your credentials, your experience, your qualifications are the things that you need or are your proxies for psychological safety, when those things are undermined or when those things are questioned, it also then undermines your own psychological safety as well. So here's an example. If somebody, Golden Key Wits is here, hello guys. If somebody says, you are not qualified, or you are in this job not because you're qualified for the job, but you're in the job because of BEE. or you're in this job because of affirmative action. And so basically they strip you of that contributor safety, because they're kind of saying, well, I see your qualifications, I see everything that you've done, but actually the reason why you're in this job is because you're black, or because you're female, or because of affirmative action. And so it's really dangerous to lean only on contributor safety, which is rooted in you showing up into spaces because of your qualifications, your authority, your credentials, because that in itself is quite thin and can be undermined quite easily. And so the inverse of that, of course, is that it's people who oftentimes have achieved learner safety, so they are really good at being explorative, at discovery, at being innovative, who excel to positions of authority that gives them contributor safety. Okay, so that's level number 3. And he says sometimes as leaders, when we are the ones that are the smartest in the room, when we are the most senior in the room, when somebody begins to question us as a leader and says, and which is what we want, right? In organizations that are innovative, in organizations that have what we call brave collaboration. If the leader responds with an insecure posture, and the leader responds in a way that says, it is my contributor safety that matters more than everybody else, automatically everyone else feels that in the absence of acquiring that particular position or that particular credential or that particular level of experience, that their psychological safety is questioned. So it's almost like a leader saying, oh, well, we want young people in the team, and then young people join the team, and then every 2 seconds the leader says, because you probably won't understand this because you don't have the experience, and then they continue the sentence. Automatically what that leader is doing is that they are creating a distance between themselves as the custodian of contributor safety and the sole custodian of contributor safety, and everybody else who is not as learned and or as credentialed as them cannot enjoy that same safety. The last level, which is the most important, is challenger safety, right? And Timothy Clark says, I've got my notes here, so I'm just scrolling up. And Timothy Clark says, challenger safety is when you've achieved all the other stages. So you've got includer safety, you've got contributor safety, you've got learner safety, and you're finally at a point within an organization or a community or whatever thing where you can actually speak your mind freely. And the only way you get to that place is when you are fully confident that speaking your mind doesn't risk you being ejected out of the community. Speaking your mind doesn't mean that there are going to be negative consequences for what happens tomorrow. And that speaking your mind is actually welcomed and encouraged, and that's what people actually want to see from you. It also means that you've come to a point where you don't feel the need to self-censor, right? To self-censor in the sense of, can I really say this in the presence of the CEO? Or can I really put this idea on the table? And remember, people with challenger safety are not afraid of being debated. It's not about, I'm not going to put my ideas out because I'm scared that somebody's going to challenge them. It's like, sure, welcome the challenge. But I'm confident to put my ideas on the table because I know if I do, it doesn't mean that if somebody challenges me and I'm wrong, that my reputation and my standing in this community is in question. And so this idea of actually being wrong doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. And oftentimes that's where we miss it, that we're unable to create that distinction between how do we give people challenger safety where they can use their voices, but at the same time we don't turn around and weaponize the use of their voices in such a way that it makes them scared to use their voices in future. And so that's what challenger safety is about. It's when you gift other people the license to truly be themselves. And that's where we all want to get to within our organizations. But as a leader, you've got to be mindful about, Are you extending that license? Are you giving people the space to truly be themselves? Or are there repercussions, even if it's unsaid and informal, that come with being yourself and raising your voice and speaking your mind? And so that's what I wanted to share with you today. I wanted to say, Timothy Clark's written an excellent book about the 4 stages of psychological safety. I think one of the things I've enjoyed most about the book is that he debunks this idea that there's only one sort of broad psychological safety. And he debunks this idea that psychological safety is always about just having a challenging voice. No, it isn't. There are different forms of psychological safety, but he also creates a beautiful cadence for us to understand that if you don't have includer safety, the likelihood is that you're not going to have learner safety. If you don't have learner safety, your likelihood is you're not going to get to contributor safety. And if you don't have contributor safety, because, we talk about the right to operate, and the right to operate oftentimes comes at contributor safety level, when you feel like you've earned the stripes and you've earned your voice and you've earned your place. And that's how challenger safety comes to play. And I think this is such an important book for a lot of people, but I want to just maybe highlight for women, Black women in particular, who are sitting on boards and looking for opportunities to sit on boards, because when you occupy that seat, the expectation is that you're not coming in to self-center and to conform and to comply. The expectation is that you're bringing something quite unique, quite different into the conversation, into the strategy of that organization, into the thinking of that organization, and into the framing of risks and opportunities of that organization. And unless you feel safe enough to do that, unless you have challenger safety, where you don't feel that because you say something and you disagree with the chairperson, for example, or you disagree with the CEO and what they've presented, that you are at risk of losing your board seat. And the minute you feel that that is the trade-off, the likelihood is that you probably don't have challenger safety, and probably there's a lot more work to be done in cultivating that safety. What I like about Timothy's book as well is that it's not just about the business environment. I love that you can apply all of this learning into your own family. How safe do you make other people feel within your family such that they can be themselves? They don't have to self-center around you. They don't have to make themselves smaller or bigger because you're in the room, because you've really given people space to be themselves, to use their voices, to learn, to try, to make mistakes, to own up to those mistakes, and to continue on their journey, notwithstanding. So that's the real talk today. It's been all about psychological safety. Get the book by Timothy Clark. I think it's a good read and certainly worth getting into. It's cheers from me for now. Bye-bye.